I know I'm on. I'm just messing with you. Happy New Year. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is January 3rd, 2010, which is really weird to say, and I don't know. I'll get over it in a couple weeks. Hope you all enjoyed whatever holiday season you did or didn't celebrate. Maybe you got some time off. Hey, we got music again. We like Brian Steeksma's song, Listen to Reason, so much that he wrote for this show that we wanted to play part of it twice. But yeah, we get tons of email. Who does that song? You know, what's that song that you've got for the intro? It's Brian Steeksma. I get so much email about it that I even created a Google auto response so that when somebody asks about the song, I can just click my canned response and send them over to his MySpace page. A Canadian musician who's brilliant and a fan of the show wrote that song specifically for the Atheist Experience. We used several other songs from him as intro music for both shows over the past 6 months or so. And we're very thankful for that. And we're glad that so many people like it and ask about it. And Brian is glad as well. This is the Atheist Experience. We're live. It's a call-in program. We'll have the number up for you shortly as soon as I get some of the regular announcements out of the way. As I mentioned, Happy New Year, and a special Happy New Year to Beth. Hi. She's watching now. And since I get to say whatever the hell I want, I thought I'd say that. All right, so it's a live public access show, and if you don't get through on the telephone today, or you don't want to get through on the telephone today, you can also email us at tv@atheist-community.org. I'm not Tracie, I promise. She's way better looking. Tracie's over there. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. We can't promise to answer all of them. We do read all of them, including emails that come in immediately before the show asking for retractions. Somebody was upset, and there was a very serious issue that they wanted a retraction for, and that is that I have stated on many occasions that Christianity has been dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And his point was that this is only true in the first world, that there are Christian groups, especially in African countries, that still label children as witches, and clearly they haven't been dragged into the 21st century. And he's correct, but I'm speaking in a broader context. Yeah, there's all sorts of atrocities going on with all sorts of religions, including Christianity, in lots of different places, and we'll get to all of that a little bit later. That's one of the reasons for the show. The Atheist Community of Austin is the sponsor of this program. You can find the ACA at the website www.atheist-community.org. You can find information there about upcoming events, everything from our regular monthly lecture series, which happens on the first Sunday of each month. The February lecture is going to be Dr. Jennifer Whitson talking about patterns in everyday life. That's February 7th, 2010, at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Every other Sunday, we'll be at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30. We have Atheist Happy Hour every Thursday, beginning at 7:30 or 7 o'clock at the Dog and Duck Pub. And after this program's over, we get together for dinner at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive. We're on the air till 6 o'clock. We normally get down to dinner around 6:30. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us at any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend, as long as you're not coming down to preach, proselytize, provoke. You're more than welcome. We invite theists, people who want to have continued discussions, as long as they're not coming down to disrupt the dinner. Because mainly, one of the reasons that the Atheist Community of Austin exists is to support atheists in the Austin area. This show being broadcast simultaneously over the internet, and we'll get those addresses up as well, has brought us to a larger audience than just Austinites. And so we're very thankful and appreciative of the interest from people around the world. the email that we received and from people in Austin who watch the program as well. Obviously, if you are in United Arab Emirates, you're not going to be able to come to Threadgills tonight, but if you're in Austin, you're invited. And there's usually plenty of room, plenty of fun. It's a good opportunity to come down and have drinks and dinner and some discussions with like-minded people. It serves the primary purpose of the ACA perfectly. There's a lot of P's in that paragraph.
Yeah, like preach, proselytize, provoke.
I added
the
more.
P's.
Add more all the time. I got a slight echo just for the folks in the booth. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. For more information, you can go to nonprofitsradio.com. That's P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S. The address is up on your screen now. The Nonprofits it's gone away. The Nonprofits will be live January 16th to start the 2010 series. It's hosted by Dennis LeBay, features Russell Glasser, myself, camera juggling. There we go. We do, though, for all those people, for the audiophiles who have been sending us email about how to correct things, we're aware that last week's podcast has audio problems. I don't know exactly what's being done to fix it. One of the things that we've done is we went out and purchased new microphones, so feel free to let us know whether the audio quality today was better or worse. We're incredibly optimistic that it'll be better since we actually spent money. So that's all of the announcements that I have.
Okay.
Do you have any announcements other than the fact that I didn't announce who we were?
No, they
Yeah.
put our names up.
Yeah, I'm Matt Dillahunty, and this is Tracie Harris,
Hey.
and we are here live. And now I'm going to actually just turn it over to you.
Okay.
So what did you bring in for us to discuss and ramble about?
We're going to talk about childhood indoctrination.
Good.
And part of the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings when we get emails or I see postings by atheists who were never indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times they have a lot of difficulty understanding how can a person believe the things that we hear these Christians saying. How can, I had this discussion, this person said this or that to me, and how is it possible that a person could believe this?
Yeah.
And
even recently there were emails of like, I figured out that this God stuff was nonsense when I was like 12. How is it that people make it all the way into their adulthood believing this?
right, and at the same time, I've had people write in and say, I think this sort of people that are raised in this, they're just messed up for life and they're never going to be okay again. And I'll write back and say, well, I was raised in this and Matt was raised in this, and you really can come out of it. Now, whether or not how that impacts you once you've gotten out of it, it's almost impossible to say because you can't ever go back and be a person that wasn't indoctrinated. So you don't really know. I guess until the day you die, how it actually affected your entire life.
You won't know then either.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, but I mean, you would go through your life and die not knowing, I guess is the way to express that. So I wanted to just sort of go through very superficially what happens with an indoctrination and how that affects people. And of course, people are different genetically, people are different environmentally. You're raised in a different family than someone else is raised in. You have different influences. Somebody else has different teachers, different grandparents. So it's impossible to say that every person, it's like you said, one person might say, I was 9 years old, I opened up the Bible, I started to read it, and I thought, this is garbage, I can't believe this, these are fairy tales. And someone else at 9 years old is concerned that they're going to go to hell. So you just can't, there is no one size fits all, but there certainly is a theme and a method to indoctrinating children.
Yeah.
So
And we indoctrinate them into all kinds of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes for good reason and good benefit.
Right, absolutely. You indoctrinate people into a lot of different things, but this is specifically to explain how, when a person is not indoctrinated and they're really sitting there and they're sincerely asking, how does a person believe this? This is what I'm hoping I can get them to at least get a grasp of how it's possible that a person could come to believe this. And there was something else that now it escapes me. It was just for a moment. There was a question that had come up in one of the emails, and I was trying to remember what that was. But I can't. If it comes to me later, I'll just go ahead and bring it up. But I want to start out with childhood thinking, and someone had sent us a link to an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, and it was called "The Power of Magical Thinking," and it was just a little bit of a summary about a study on how children understand reality from fantasy, and at what age they understand differences between things that are real and things that are not real. And it was one of the things that they used was the garbage man and Santa Claus, because they said most children see evidence of the garbage man, but they don't ever see the garbage man, just like they see evidence of Santa Claus, but they don't see Santa Claus. So they took children as young as 3, and they found that they understand the concept of what is real and what isn't. And that's very basic. It's not that they demonstrated no confusion. It was that they did demonstrate that they understand the idea. When you ask them if something's real, they know what you're asking. Now, whether or not they can tell if a thing is real or not is a whole other issue.
Right.
Until they're about 7, kids can be easily misled by adults, persuasive words, or by evidence. And when they're saying evidence, they're talking about evidence that would seem to lead to a certain conclusion, but maybe that it's not quite what it seems.
The stockings are full and the toys
Right,
appear.
right. It sure looks like Santa came last night, and there's definitely evidence for that, but they're not thinking in terms of what else could be causing this. They hold on to their beliefs about some fantastical characters like Santa longer than others, such as monsters and dragons. So children will drop their belief in something like a dragon and understand that it's not real, while they're still believing that Santa Claus is real. Most of the kids in the study were Christians, and the numbers of those who believed in Santa would likely be smaller if there were children of other religious backgrounds in the same sample. And by this, I think they're just saying that most Christians celebrate Christmas, so it's more likely that those children would be exposed to Santa, as opposed to, you wouldn't test the Santa theory on, Muslim-raised children or,
right.
Jewish children. It certainly wouldn't be the same valid question.
In those cases, you could go with Mr. Hanky.
The Christmas poo. So it says, logically, from what kids observe, it makes sense to think that Santa is real. And this is according to Dr. Woolley. She's a psychologist and professor at the University of Texas. Santa and the trash collector share certain characteristics. Both are people whom kids have heard about but have likely never met before. There's proof for Santa's existence. The gifts that appear on Christmas morning, as well as the garbage man, he makes trash disappear, even though kids don't usually see them in action. A 5-year-old has the cognitive skills to put together the pieces of evidence, but because the pieces are misleading, he or she comes to the wrong conclusion. Younger children may not have the cognitive skills to put the pieces of evidence together, so may in fact be less likely to believe in Santa's existence. And that was what was interesting, is that the 3-year-olds were less likely to say Santa exists than the 5-year-olds. So it seems that the 3-year-olds are believing in something, but it's not really based on evidence. They're not evaluating the evidence. As they get older and they start to understand the evidence, they begin to believe more, even though the evidence is leading them to the wrong conclusion. So at 3 years old, whatever is your method of determining real from unreal is not evidence-based. And then at 5, you begin to weigh evidence a little bit more. Let's see. The 5-year-old has cognitive skills to put the pieces together, but because they may be misleading, they come to the wrong conclusion. And so, let's see, she says, what types of cues and contexts are most convincing to children? Her research team went into preschooler classrooms and told them about a new character that they called the Candy Witch. And this was a woman who comes on Halloween, after Halloween, and she changes out your candy for toys. And they got some of the parents to go along with this and tell the kids, the Candy Witch might come and take your candy and give you a toy instead. And then they switched out the candy for the toys in some of the homes. So all these kids got the story. Some of the kids actually got the switch. And let's see. Nearly 2/3 of the children were convinced that the Candy Witch was real. Those kids who were visited by the witch were more convinced of it. And like Santa Claus, older preschoolers who were on average 5 years old were more convinced than younger preschoolers who averaged 3.5 years old. These results were published in the Journal of Developmental Science in 2004. So from this we see that children are easily manipulated with evidence, and they can be reasonable, but they can still be wrong. So it's not unreasonable to believe something exists when it doesn't, but it can still be wrong if you're basing it on evidence that is not good evidence.
Right.
And that's why verification and not popularity is required to demonstrate the truth value of a claim. So that's another thing that we see a lot in our email is people who are extremely intent on changing someone's mind, but not necessarily providing adequate evidence to justify that change of mind. So it sometimes seems more important for someone to, it's almost like if I can convince you to agree with me, then I'm right. And it's like, no, if I convince you to agree with me, then I just convinced you to agree with me, and if I'm wrong, we're both wrong now.
Right.
So verification is what demonstrates the truth value of your claim, not convincing other people. Simply convincing other people gets them to agree with you whether you're right or not. And if you're wrong, you're just convincing more people to believe something that's wrong.
Right.
Let's see, and then we talked about the 5-year-olds being more influenced by evidence. Currently, she and her students are examining another concept related to reality, when an event is impossible versus improbable. And this was kind of interesting. They gave the kids different scenarios, and the children took, I don't know if they put them in paper or how they did it, but the children had to separate these little things into this thing is impossible or this thing is improbable. And they gave the example of one of the 5-year-olds who was given the scenario, Sarah owned a peacock as a pet. And when she was asked whether the scenario was real or not, she said it's not real. And when she was asked to explain how she knew that it wasn't real, she said because nobody owns a peacock. So she took something that's improbable and she put it in the impossible category because she just simply was making an assumption that since no one owns a peacock for a pet, it's impossible to own a peacock for a pet. That was her 5-year-old logic. Another scenario was Julia jumped into the air and never came back down. And Mia also correctly identified this as impossible. And when she was asked to explain her reasoning behind why it's impossible to jump into the air and not come down, she said, because nobody wants to live in the clouds where they can't see the sky. So Mia, in one instance, she got it wrong for, I don't want to say it's a wrong reason. I think that there is a certain understanding of saying, I have never seen this, but she doesn't quite get that that doesn't make it impossible.
The same type of mistake in reasoning led to a correct answer in one case and an incorrect answer.
Right. In her other answer, at least though, to say that I've never seen this. I don't believe it because I've never seen it. But to say that it's impossible, that would be going a little bit too far. But then the other one, because no one wants to live in the clouds, it's just completely, out there. I mean,
Although
it's bizarre.
some of our callers, I think, may want to live in the clouds.
But the point is, she doesn't say it's because gravity is stopping you from staying up. It's like, no, because if you stayed up there, you would never get to see the sky.
I'm wondering if there's something about if there's something in this where you and I talked earlier about knowing something's wrong but not knowing why.
Yes.
In much the same way that, for example, if I did a particular magic trick and tried to tell her that I was psychic, she may not know exactly how it's done, but she knows there's a trick there, even if she never knew that I did tricks. And I'm wondering if this isn't akin to that. I know that people don't live in the clouds. I'm not sure why, so I'm going to make up a reason that makes sense from my point of view.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Because there's no actual evidence in there, other than I don't want to live in the clouds because I wouldn't be able to see the sky. So it's an entirely personal thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Let's see, her responses are typical for her age, says Dr. Woolley. Early results suggest that 5-year-olds don't yet have the ability to distinguish what is impossible from what is unlikely to happen but could technically happen. In future work, Dr. Woolley and her collaborators plan to investigate whether a researcher acknowledging that the situation is, whether a researcher acknowledging that the situation is strange alters the kid's view of whether the scenario is real. And they talk a little bit about imaginary friends, and they say that imaginary friends can be used to help children cope with stress. And I thought that was an interesting point, that feeling like you have someone there with you can help you feel better about a stressful situation. And they said this is a strength of children, their ability to pretend they can fix a problem with their imagination. And I know that a lot of people have contacted us to talk about their feelings of comfort, like, you know, how comfortable they felt either believing in the past that there was someone there to look out for them, or feeling like there is somebody there.
Right.
And I've heard people even say, you know, I couldn't have gotten through this time without God.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done this without God. And it's just, it's sad that they did do it on their own, but they don't acknowledge their own power. And let's see, this demonstrates, I think the note that I put at the top was that this is how kids think and how they can be misled. And this next section is how kids can be manipulated further as they get older. So you have this idea that children are not thinking really clearly. Obviously, at these ages, their logic is not working properly. Their experience of the world is not, you know, is too insufficient.
Which is what prompts this fallacy of the world is me. We are all prone to this because we live our lives by induction and inference, by and large. And when you come across something that is outside of your realm of experience, if everybody you know does this, then all of a sudden your experience, you are the world, and your experience is supposed to be typical of the world. So this, the world is me, underlies things like, you know, the no true Scotsman fallacy,
right,
and et cetera. And it, I think, may relate to the living in the clouds thing. In her entire experience, having never been presented with the opportunity to live in the clouds, thinking about it, the immediate reaction is, well, I wouldn't want to live up in the clouds, and the world is me, so therefore it becomes improbable, impossible, et cetera.
Right, yeah, or no one owns a peacock, meaning no one I know owns a peacock. Right. Because in reality, there are people that own peacocks.
Zoos,
so,
for one thing. Oh.
There you go. And so anyway,
the peacocks probably.
You have at this age between 5 to 9 this sort of confusion about what is real, what is not real, what is possible, what is not possible, and basically not a really good working model of reality. I mean, you're able to discern some basic things, you're able to figure some things out, but your reasoning is not always good, your evaluation of the evidence is sometimes not what it could be, you're not, you know, questioning as much as you might when you get a little bit older. And so you've got this confused sort of thinking at these younger ages that is developing into, you know, something a little bit more tangible as these kids get near to adolescence. And so then I would get into how you can really mess this kid up would be to use emotional manipulation, which they have an acronym called FOG, which is fear, obligation, and guilt. And fear, obligation, and guilt are methods that people that are abusive in relationships use to bully and victimize other people in those relationships. So when you see a relationship where someone is being emotionally abused, where they're being taken advantage of, usually someone is manipulating them through fear or through a sense of obligation or a sense of guilt that is not healthy.
Right.
Because all of these things, fear, obligation, and guilt, actually were, you know, they're given rise to a positive function. Mm-hmm. But you can take that thing that is intended as a positive function to say that it helps us with cohesion and with getting along in society and with protecting us from harm. And you can say, I'm going to do things I'll say, like, if you don't do what I want, then I'm leaving this relationship. You know, if you don't agree to have a child with me, I'm going to leave this relationship. And that would be an abuse of trying to make somebody fear, trying to make somebody feel, you know, bad about something, or say, like, I really want a child, and you know how much that means to me, but you won't have a baby with me, and so, you know, I just don't think that's fair.
It's because you're married to somebody else.
Right, no. This is hypothetical. So
we
anyway,
shouldn't be airing this laundry in public.
Dang it. Anyway, it's just the idea of taking what we know to be healthy emotions that are in people and twisting those things around to try to get somebody to do what we want them to do. And that would be a bad use of those emotions, to try to manipulate other people with them. And then when I came across an essay, and there's nothing particularly authoritative about it. It was just that I thought it was an eloquent explanation of what happens as these children start to get older. And it was literally about religious indoctrination. And what this is Michael David McGee, It was just an essay on conversion, and he says the process of conversion begins with an inner struggle in early adolescence brought on largely by a gradual sexual awakening, inculcating a feeling of guilt in children brought up thinking humanity is given to sin. He describes a sense of incompleteness and imperfection, brooding, depression, introspection, a sense of sin, anxiety about the future, life, and doubts that they have. And I think that even without religious indoctrination, a lot of times kids have these feelings of brooding, confusion. You're hitting an age where you're coming out of childhood, you're getting more responsibilities as an adult, and yet you're restricted as a kid still. You've got this kind of, you want to separate and become your own person. You're starting to actually think like an individual at this point. You're no longer as confused as you were about your reasoning. You're forming independent opinions. And you have all these things thrown at you, and you have to start making decisions about the type of person that you're going to become. And so this is a point where a young person is going to be sort of self-conscious, self-focused. A lot of kids, sit in front of the mirror wishing their nose was different, and they, thinking that, oh my gosh, everyone sees that my hair is looking funny today, or they're at a point of crisis where everything is changing for them. And when everything is changing in your life and everything is changing about you and people are throwing expectations at you and everything is becoming different, change just breeds a bit of insecurity in people at any stage. But when you're a child coming into independence out of a fully dependent existence, that's an extremely big step. And that's a point where these people are starting to feel not so sure of themselves. They're wondering about decisions and things that they're going to make, things that will affect their life. Where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? Who am I going to date? And at this point, with children who are indoctrinated, they're also dealing with something that is, what do I decide about God? And we're going to talk a little bit about how important, if you haven't been indoctrinated, you're thinking probably, well, why is that an important decision? But we're going to talk about what's given to these children between the ages of, 3 to 9, and why that decision seems to weigh on them and cause a huge amount of stress for them, specifically where a child that's not indoctrinated or does not take to an indoctrination doesn't feel as stressed. Let's see. One of the things I wanted to do, and because I don't like to speak on behalf of Christians, usually when I give a Christian doctrine, I try to quote from Christian sites or use Christian quotes. And so in this case, I felt nothing does this better than children's Bible songs, just children's Sunday school songs. And so I got these lyrics. These are popular children's Bible school songs. And they are songs that you have to remember that the doctrine of Christianity is basically that people are flawed. They are so flawed that they do not deserve God's love, and yet God loves them anyway. And so these children, and the idea is Jesus Christ died as a human sacrifice in order to atone for your worthlessness. And you have no real inherent worth, but God loves you regardless of your lack of worth. So from the song, Jesus Loves Me, it says, Jesus loves me, he who died, heaven's gates to open wide. He will wash away my sin, let this little child come in. And this is literally children that are I remember singing this in preschool. And basically the child is singing about Jesus washing away his sin and Jesus being killed, and how this is how the child is going to be allowed into heaven despite the fact that he is a sinful child. And when I hear people talking about how, we don't undercut children's self-esteem, we don't say anything that would make the child feel, bad about themselves. It's like, well, you're telling the child here, you're making the child sing that he is sinful, and that somebody died as a human sacrifice so that he can get into heaven where he can be with God, obviously, and that this death he's taught was required because of his evilness. And then from the song, the B-I-B-L-E, there's a verse that says, the B-L-O-O-D that Jesus shed for me, cleansed me from sin, I belong to him, the B-L-O-O-D. To me, this, I don't know, it's just appalling. When I look at it, it's appalling, but I don't know. Does it need explanation? I belong to Jesus because he was, brutally murdered as a human sacrifice by his own father in that plan, and his blood is washing me clean from my evil self. And then this is a song called I'm Inright, Outright, Upright, Downright Happy All the Time. And the line says, since Jesus Christ came in and cleansed my heart from sin. And then from Jesus Loves Little Children, it says, Jesus died for all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus died for all the children in the world. And additionally, this one I wanted to just include because it was appalling. It's called Oh, Be Careful. And it says, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. There's a Father up above looking down in tender love, like Big Brother. So be careful, little eyes, what you see. The next line, I think, just freaked me out even more. I don't know if freaked out is the word, but just I couldn't believe it when I read it. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. What disturbs me about this is that it's almost like don't listen. Don't listen. I mean, what could you possibly be hearing? How could you stop yourself from hearing? You know, obviously, if you're within earshot of something, you're going to hear it. So this is about making sure that you don't listen to the wrong things. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. You know, obviously, yes, I can understand how you wouldn't want your child to go off swearing. Be careful, little hands, what you touch. Be careful, little feet, where you go. But yeah, be careful, little ears, what you hear was a little bit disturbing on a level of warning a child not to listen. And this is the kind of things that you become so used to when you're, you know, at the age of 3 and 5 and 7, you may not fully understand what it is that you're being hit with these things, but you begin to internalize this, and we had talked about it, it becomes normalized. Yeah. So even if you don't understand the idea of human sacrifice and you don't understand the idea of, you know, brutal murder and somebody being killed as justification for someone else's crimes, and if you don't understand the idea that you're internalizing a concept that there's something inherently wrong with you. If you're taught the doctrine of hell, there's something inherently wrong with you that makes you deserve eternal torture. And you are a sponge, a little sponge soaking this up. And then you hit an age where you hit crisis, and suddenly the question of, am I going to spend eternity in hell, becomes just huge on your mind. And if I can skip real quickly to a few adult songs, I'll just skip some of this stuff because I know we've got callers, but a few adult songs that kind of show what I'm talking about. There's one called Have You Counted the Cost? And it says, have you counted the cost if your soul should be lost, though you gain the whole world for your own? Even now it may be that the line you have crossed, have you counted the cost?
One thing about the kids' songs, though, and this specifically relates to the issue of indoctrination, is I'm sure there are plenty of Christians out there who, current Christians, I mean, former Christians will recognize some of those songs, but current Christians out there who are going, yeah, okay, those are the lyrics. I mean, that's the facts. There's nothing, you know, nefarious about this or evil, or it's not indoctrination. It's just singing. Okay, I'm 40. I remember those songs the second Tracie starts talking about them. Yep, I remember them. I remember most of the lyrics. I don't remember anything else from when I was 4. There's a reason why some of us are ginormous fans and junkies of things like Schoolhouse Rock. It's because singing something, music, learning the tune, is conducive to memory. You remember those things very clearly, very strongly, for ages. I mean, there are songs that I haven't heard probably in 20 years, and if they'd come on, if it was a song that I listened to over and over again, I'd immediately go back to singing along. You could say, well, what's the lyrics to such and such? And I couldn't tell you, but the song, when it starts, prompts the lyrics. It's the way your brains work. And what we're talking about here is wiring little kids' brains with ideas that they don't understand yet, so that when they reach this age in puberty, et cetera, and probably for the rest of their lives in many cases, but especially in puberty, when their entire life is changing, when their physiology is changing, when they are in a state of crisis, at that point, they're less likely to question, is this real? This is what we talked about today with regard to my story. There are some people who, when they begin questioning in their teens, say, is this whole God thing real? those people have already escaped indoctrination. They've already escaped the effects of indoctrination to ask those kinds of questions down that path. There's a second set that have not escaped indoctrination, myself included, who, when you have doubts, it's more about not whether or not a God exists, but am I right with God? Am I saved? Am I experiencing the same love and experience that these other people do? And if your answer is no, then what do? As any good Southern Baptist teen will tell you, you rededicate your life to Christ and you start all over again. And you do this, I can't count the number of times I watched people rededicate and I rededicated, and it's all in this attempt to get something that you know must necessarily be real, that you seem to have the evidence to support in much the same way that the trash disappears, so there's a garbage man, but presents appearing don't mean that there's a Santa Claus. You appear to have evidence that supports it. You have been stuck by this indoctrination at basically the 7-year level when it comes to this issue of the question of God's existence and our relationship to that entire religious spectrum. You're stuck there. And that's what the indoctrination does, and that's
right.
Why we're
and one thing
it.
I kind of skipped over that I should have brought in was from that essay, conversion removes all the negatives, leaving a sense of relief. And we talked about that too. It's like when you're that age, we get so many letters from young people who say, I was so worried. I mean, I was worried, I prayed so hard, I was so scared I was going to go to hell for like a year when I was 14. I just prayed and prayed and prayed, and I just begged God to help save me and give me some kind of a sign or let me know that this was real or come into my heart or whatever it is that they believe that they need from God. They are begging for this. They're begging for this out of extreme fear that they are going to make a wrong choice and go to hell because they believe that that's a real possibility. So these kids are just, freaking out thinking, I have to make this decision. And we get letters from adults who write to us and say, if you don't reconcile this question, you will live your entire life in fear and doubt about whether or not there really is a God. Now, obviously, Matt and I are not living in fear and doubt about whether or not there is a God. And so the person who writes and says that we're going to experience that can only be speaking from a self-perspective. They are basically saying, if I hadn't decided to go ahead and believe in God, I would be in fear and doubt. Because what happens is after a year or 2 years or 3 years of begging and fearing and freaking out and saying, oh my God, am I going to go to hell? Sometimes it's just easier to say, I have to believe this. Yeah. Because if I don't believe this, this is going to be forever. And when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, it's just like when you have your first broken heart. For a lot of people, they just think, oh my God, I'm never going to feel this way again.
Yeah.
Because you don't have life experience and you don't understand that you really can figure things out and get past this. You can resolve this. And so they're thinking, there's no way I can know if there's a God or not, and so am I going to spend the rest of my life fearing and doubt and worrying about going to hell, or am I going to embrace this and believe it and then it all goes away? And I can be relieved and I can believe and then it's fine. And that's where you get Pascal's wager. It was so much better for me to just believe it than to go on in this state of limbo where I was just freaked out about what was going to happen to me. If you think that the choice is eternal fear and doubt for the rest of your life versus believing it and then all of that goes away and you get that relief, it's really easy to do what it takes to force yourself to accept a thing.
So do we want to start taking some calls real quick?
Sure.
All right, we've got Justin. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I called in 2 weeks ago from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, regarding the nativity scene in Menorah at the Luzerne County Courthouse.
Yeah, now that Christmas is over, is there any new developments?
Actually, yes, there is. Well, for those who haven't turned in, the courthouse owned, maintained, and put up nativity scene in Menorah, part of our areas on the lawn, the courthouse. I'm cracking up here. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. They had one snowman behind a tree, and the menorah and the nativity scene were far apart. I filed a complaint, and the scenes were taken down. An outrage soon sparked. People protested, receiving tons of hate mail. Recently, the items put back up very secular decorations like candy canes, snowman, Winnie the Pooh, reindeer, and Santa Claus. And even after this happened, religious people were still angry because they said the religious message was being watered down and the rights are being taken away. They still don't get it. I got an unnamed Christmas card recently that says this: Mohammed and Beelzebub are prophets, you, Justin. What is a smug, arrogant devil like you doing at a Catholic college? You should be expelled. wishing you and yours an unmerry Christmas.
Great. Was your Christmas unmerry?
No, it was
Then they
actually
didn't
very
get their
happy. I had
wish.
a great time. I asked people if their Christmases were ruined because this happened, and everyone seemed to have a great time.
You know, if maybe instead of wishing for you to have an unmerry Christmas, they'd have actually prayed about it, maybe you would have had an no, that's not.
Well, some people have said that, oh, I'll pray to you, and oh, this thing you're going through, and this and that. But I said, great, pray for me, but you know, it's not going to.
The only thing I'm going through is the fact that you assholes are trying to annoy us and take away rights and shove your perspective down everybody's throat. So yeah, if you want to pray for that to stop, I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, but they won't do that. The leader of my local group, the NEP Free Thought Society, has issued a challenge to an entire church of, if God is real, you pray for me to not be an atheist, and you know, then that'll prove it. But so far, nothing's happened.
Yeah, that's actually a bad idea. There's almost none of these, you know, you don't want to set up a test that's foolproof, but you also don't want to set up a test that concedes a position unnecessarily. I mean, obviously, if I were to convert to a particular religion or adopt it and believe it, then I would no longer be an atheist, and I would be convinced that, in fact, there was some God. But that alone would not be sufficient evidence for anybody else.
Right, of course.
And of course, I don't think it's likely in the slightest, but I would put it in the improbable but not impossible
There you go.
category.
Right, it's a little bit silly. But recently, a second thing I wanted to bring up, I was speaking to my aunt about this nativity scene, and she said, oh, I have this friend, he'll set you straight, he'll answer all your questions about religion, and this thing went on for a while, and finally I spoke to him, and I was anticipating a really good argument, but he kept arguing about the soul, and saying we all have souls, the soul is the vital life force in us, and he gave no evidence for it, and I said, you know, why should I believe in this? He said, because humans can't have the faculties to experience God, so God reveals himself in Scripture, and that's why we should believe him.
And that proves a soul how?
That's what he said. I said, well, do you believe all books you read? What about other religions? And he said, oh, no, it's different. I experience it. That's our life force that we have.
Well, if humans don't have the faculties to perceive God, then how does he know God's there?
That's what I told him. He said, but if you have faith, God reveals himself to you in Scripture. And
Hey, you know what?
So if you believe it, then suddenly you know it's true.
Yeah.
apparently that's what he thought.
If you have faith, anything's true.
Yep. I said, well, you know, I believed in it once before, and I had faith, but now I don't. So, can I experience God? Is that a possibility? And the argument pretty much went nowhere from there.
There are, well, I won't even say it. So, well, I'm glad you got back in touch with us. You were going to have a meeting and tell us how that came out.
Yes, we did have our meeting, but unfortunately there were no protesters.
Ah.
But we had a record turnout. We had a great discussion, and it was really nice. It was a great end of the year.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thanks a lot for calling back and giving us details on what happened.
All right, thanks a lot. Have a great one.
Thanks, Justin. Bye-bye. And we have Guy in Japan.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can relate to what Trace was saying about the indoctrination before growing up in a strict Mormon family.
Ah.
But that's not why I called in. I wanted to ask about, I've been talking with some people about the problem of evil, and I seem to get as an answer a lot of free will argument. And I feel like maybe I don't really understand it. It seems like it's so easily answered, but I don't know. I wanted to see if you can maybe explain to me what the Christian or the theist free will answer to the problem of evil would be.
Well, here's the question. When these people that you're arguing with are asked whether or not God knows everything, including full details of the future, what is their response?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do they accept that God is completely omniscient, including future events?
Yes.
Then free will doesn't matter. If God knows everything you're going to do before you do it, and God can't be wrong, then you have no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the problem, though. They look at it. What's happening is they respond, but you have free will, and they're usually what they mean by that is God is not controlling your actions. But the truth is, it doesn't matter if God is not controlling your actions. If He knows everything you're going to do, something has already determined your actions, whether it's God or not. So they're probably, when they're saying you have free will, they're probably saying God is not controlling you like a robot. My response is, I'm fine accepting that if that's what you believe, that God is not controlling me, but just the fact that He, with hands off, sees everything I will do up to the day I die means that I have no choices.
And it also seems like, why is it necessary for us to have free will? Like, what is good about free will?
Well, I don't know that it's necessary. In fact, I'd challenge somebody to demonstrate it exists. I mean, it's possible, but since we can only do one thing at a time, how would anybody be able to demonstrate that they could have done something different than they did?
Yeah. I seem to get a lot of answers saying that, I don't know, somehow rationalizing that if we do have free will and that it is necessary and it's good, which just leads me to think, well, then does God have free will?
Well, there's a lot of problems here, specifically as Tracie pointed out, with the idea of free will in a worldview that includes an omniscient being. There's also a ton of questions you can ask after the fact, like, is there free will in heaven? If so, then wouldn't you be able to sin? And you get all kinds of answers like, yes, there's free will, but you wouldn't want to sin. Well, then that wouldn't be me. Clearly, there would be something that would be dictating my behavior and limiting my free will. But to get back to what you originally asked, which was the free will response to the problem of evil, and since we didn't really address either one of them, the problem of evil is essentially an argument against the existence of God, that pretty much it's against the existence of specific gods, that says if there's a benevolent, all-knowing, all-powerful God, then that God cannot exist in conjunction with evil. Because if He's all-knowing, then He knows about the evil. If He's all-powerful, He can stop the evil. And if He's all-good, then He would stop the evil. And the kind of, not freshman, sophomoric Christian response is to say, yes, but we have free will and that's important, and so God will not overwrite your free will. Well, the problem of evil doesn't just deal with the actions of individuals, whether they have free will or not. The problem of evil addresses the entirety of the world we live in, and actually it's probably better expressed as the problem of unnecessary evil, in much the same way that fear is a good thing and pain is a good thing, and it lets you know not to keep touching the stove. The extent to which evil exists, or things that do harm exist, goes well beyond the pale. It doesn't necessarily, birth defects, that's not a function of free will. Tsunamis, that's not a function of free will. Those types of things also fit into the kind of newer argument from evil, and they cannot be responded to by free will. So if you're discussing the argument, the problem of evil, and they're coming up with free will as a response, instead of going down the rabbit hole of free will, you can start by saying free will has nothing to do with birth defects, tsunamis, cancers, etc.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand why I keep getting this answer when it seems so inherently flawed on so many levels. Yeah.
You keep getting it because it's the one that they got from their preacher. Just like when Leanne called in to tell the story of the serial killer who kidnapped that woman, she probably got it because it's something that evidently James Dobson or the Dobson family has been kicking around here recently. And when we get calls from people, the reason we get some of the same arguments over and over again is in part because they get bandied around by apologists like, won't mention any names, but all the various apologists get people spun up with these arguments. And they are incredibly convincing to someone who already believes. Even when I began to have doubts about my own beliefs and everything else, I went to someone who I consider to be intelligent and wise about the ways of Christianity and said, look, I've got some atheist friends, which was true, and how would I witness to them? Because I just can't find a way to really, any hard-hitting evidence, because it's all so personal. And his response is, well, ask him how you can possibly have any morality without God. Literally, the conversation went this quick. He said that, and I went, oh, yeah. Well, duh. Of course. Why didn't I think of it? How can all these atheists be so stupid that they haven't thought of this? That is how convincing it is, as long as you're already, you have all the preconceptions that that people build their theology on. You have to force yourself to take an objective look at these issues in order to determine, okay, do they actually have any merit? I mean, that sounds really good, and it certainly bolsters my belief, but is it convincing? And unfortunately, the way most people discover it is by actually talking to some atheist, particularly somebody who's been where they were, and they bring up this argument, and the atheist points out, that's dumb. Of course you can have a morality without a religion, without a God, all you need is individual desires and a cooperative environment, and you can build from the very, very simplest basic building blocks an entire moral structure that is incredibly complex and diverse over time. It's not even hard. And I've had conversations face to face with people who will present that argument, and I will present a response, and I kid you not, it's, no, but wait a minute, you can't have a moral code without God. You have to have, no, here's why. And you explain it again, and they sit there nice and patiently and don't interrupt, and then they say, yeah, no, but you can't have a moral code without a moral authority. Okay, well, we are no, we're not the authority, God's the authority. It's like the conversation we had today about the Hitchens discussion, which I'll let you do rather than me.
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly, I did remember that thing that I was trying to think of earlier. It was about stripping away apologetics. People who have never been raised in indoctrination will argue apologetics, and they get to the end, and the person says, well, I don't know what to tell you, but I have faith. I feel like there's a God. And the atheist at that point, who's never been indoctrinated, just says, what in the world just happened? I just spent 2 weeks online arguing with this person, rebutting all these arguments, looking up scientific theories, providing information, and I get to the end of it, and they say it doesn't matter that you've refuted everything, I got to have faith. The reason for that is because this belief was put into them when they were 3 years old, and they built it up from that. The apologetics got layered on later as the reasons for justification for that belief that was already instilled. And like you're saying, once they hit that age where they accept it, they then are looking at the apologetics and questions about the apologetics and not necessarily questioning God. But the thing about Hitchens, which was sort of the same thing, it has to do with these pre-assumptions, and God being the main pre-assumption. It was a video I watched last night on YouTube. It was like a two-part video with, I guess it's Todd Friel, I think was his name.
Yeah.
And he wanted to do this interview with Hitchens, and I told Matt I didn't even know who this was, and I was thinking, who in the world booked Christopher Hitchens with this person, because the caliber of the interview was just so not what he's usually put into. So he wanted, the person interviewing was obviously a theist and wanted to say, well, we're going to do this I'll do these 12 questions or however many questions, and we're going to have a hypothetical. What if the Christian God that you reject exists? And we're going to hypothetically say this God exists, and I'm going to give you like the doctrines, and you tell me how that would change your perspective on things. And so he presents Hitchens with all these arguments, about, well, if God made you, then don't you believe that you would be obligated then to do everything that he says? And Hitchens is like, absolutely not. And the guy goes, well, remember now, we're talking hypothetically that there really is this God, and he really is the God of the Bible. And Hitchens is like, yes, I understand, and I don't believe that would give him, he's like, by what right would he be able to then dictate to me everything that I should do? Wouldn't that just be tyranny? And the guy is like, well, but remember, hypothetically, this is the God. And Hitchens is like, yes, I understand the hypothetical is that this God exists, and he is there. And he's just like, well, he made you. He made you. He gave you life, and he gave you this planet. He gave you all your success, and he's responsible for everything in your life. And wouldn't you be obligated then to do everything he says? And Hitchens is like, absolutely not. I would not be obligated. He's like, but this is a hypothetical where God is real. And Hitchens is like, yes, I understand that. I'm saying that I would not feel obligated to this being under those circumstances. And all through the show, he was like going through the 10 Commandments, he was going through the resurrection and the sacrifice of Jesus for salvation, and down the line, Hitchens is like, no, I would not feel obligated by that, and no, I do not feel like I need to follow the 10 Commandments as, you know, he's like, I follow some, like murder and stuff, but that has nothing to do with a command from God. I do that for other reasons. And the guy's like, but remember, we're going from a hypothetical that God is real. And it's just like, I understand that we're going through this hypothetical that God is real. I'm assuming that your God is real, and I'm telling you, it wouldn't matter to me what his commandments were. If his commands include that I have to grovel and worship and spend my life praising him because I'm alive, no, I'm not going to do that, and I wouldn't feel obligated to do that. And just throughout, about the 6th or 7th time, this Todd Friel guy said, but we're going from this hypothetical. I was saying to my computer, he understands. He understands. Why don't you understand that he understands? And it was just this complete disconnect in Friel's brain where he could not grasp that somebody could understand the scenario that he's explaining and not agree with his own conclusions. It was beyond the pale for him. It was impossible for me. I don't know how Hitchens, I mean, however many times he insisted that he did get it, that yes, if this God was real, I would still say this. And Friel could just, his response was always to go back, like Matt is saying, and say, you don't understand what I'm saying. And it's like, no, Hitchens totally understands what you're saying. You don't understand that a person can think differently than you.
I figured out, though, how Hitchens can keep his cool far longer than me.
Oh, he's
I think I'm going to
amazing.
start having scotch on the show.
Is that what it is?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So, anyway, did that answer your question and then some, Guy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking my
People
call.
forgot you were even on the line.
I did too.
Thanks a lot for calling. We really appreciate it. We've got, is it Tal in Tucson?
Yeah, actually,
Hello.
this is
Down here.
Oh, 2.
There's 2 people?
Yes.
That's a first.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah,
go ahead, Tal.
I am. My question for you guys is what you believe what reality is, and if there might possibly be a creator of the universe.
Okay. I used to have a definition for reality that I used in the belief lecture, and I'm not going to get it exactly right.
Okay.
But reality is that which is demonstrably true, independently verifiable by others. Now, obviously, that would exclude some things that most of us would consider in reality. My own emotions are not necessarily verifiable by somebody else, and yet they are part of reality. They are part of what I experience. The distinction that I'm trying to make here is that reality is what I experience with the understanding that my experience may not always be accurate, and where it's possible to verify, that determines what is or isn't reality. On the second question of whether or not I think it's possible that there's a creator, if you're asking about an intelligent, godlike, I don't even want to use that particular word, an intelligent creator that is responsible for the origin of everything in the universe, no, I don't think that's possible. And I think that there's very good reason for that, in that that level of intelligence and power and everything else is something that would necessarily have had to evolve. I don't see how it could be possible that something like that exists or existed, but I'm not saying that I believe that I don't see how it's possible. But if someone is to demonstrate how it is possible, I'm more than happy to change my mind. So maybe, perhaps, I don't want to say that, use the distinction between improbable and impossible, because then it makes it sound like I think that there may be some way. I'm not aware of any way that this sort of thing would be possible. And I think that it is, but the moment that someone provides evidence for how it would be possible, I change my mind on that.
Okay. So, what's your, I guess, opinion on, I guess, quantum mechanics and other dimensions?
I don't know enough about quantum mechanics to say one way or the other from my limited experience. To me, it seems like people that are way too enamored with math and make it kind of magical. Now, that is an incredibly layman, math ignorant opinion, but I don't see any relevance there. When someone points out the benefits or the evidence that, you know, the particular idea or hypothesis that people derive from quantum mechanics is actually true, okay, that's cool. But it's in the neighborhood of science fiction for me at the moment. Not that the actual mechanics are wrong or misunderstood. I'm talking about the various hypotheses about alternate dimensions and multiverses and things like
Well,
that.
it'll be interesting when they can demonstrate it.
Yeah, you know, and I don't see that it matters at all. What my beliefs are about multiverses or alternate dimensions is
Right.
completely irrelevant.
Right.
Because, well, for a million reasons, but one of them is that I don't need an answer. I don't need to grasp at an answer just because it may seem reasonable to somebody else. I am only going to accept explanations that I am convinced of. And I'm not convinced of that one, partially because I would imagine I'm not an expert in the field and haven't had anybody demonstrate it, but also because it's not something that's generally scientifically accepted. It's in the fringes. It's the neat ideas category, like the God particle and the equation, the one.
But I guess more importantly is it doesn't affect my atheism.
Yeah, actually, it probably doesn't affect anything. I mean, my acceptance or rejection of the various claims doesn't have any impact on my life. I mean, I'm not going to change, you know, my shopping habits or anything else based on this.
I guess what I'm saying is if there's a multiverse, that really isn't the reason that I believe or don't believe in God.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do, it has no bearing on my belief. My disbelief in God is not based on whether or not there's a multiverse.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my third question would be then, if this hydrogen collider, or let's say some sort of technology is invented in 20 years that picks up what is called the God particle, what would your beliefs be then?
It would depend on what it demonstrated. But I
Well,
mean, if
it
something
doesn't say that
is,
there is,
Well,
a creator of the universe, for example.
if something is demonstrated, I would not accept demonstrable, conclusive evidence. I would, but until that day, I don't believe it.
But my thing is, I don't know, maybe I'm just really, really wrong here because this isn't my area at all. But the God particle has nothing to do with demonstrating that there's a creative intelligence behind the universe. It's a label that they put on a hypothetical particle that they're trying to demonstrate that may give us the answers
Yeah.
about, but that it doesn't mean that there's all of a sudden this transcended intelligent being.
Right, just to clarify, what I was saying was whatever is demonstrated, I would accept. But it would depend on what was demonstrated. If somebody asked me, then what would you believe? I would believe whatever was conclusively demonstrated, but I don't know what that would be until I'm confronted with it.
They find a particle, I'm going to believe is a particle, just like uranium or, you know, any atomic structure we've identified, any you know, protons, electrons, et cetera. I'm going to accept whatever the findings of science are to the extent that I
Right.
understand them. Granted, there are things that I don't understand, so I can't possibly accept them. There are lots of things like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much why I became a philosopher and looked into things like that. So,
Great. Is that all you had?
yep,
All right.
right,
Thanks a lot
thanks.
for calling.
thanks.
We've got Chris in Greenville, South Carolina.
Hey,
How are you, Chris?
I'm all right.
Wait, this says South Carolina and that says North Carolina. Which is it?
South Carolina.
Aha.
Actually, the previous caller kind of got me thinking about something about like, demonstrable evidence or something that, either there was the creator of the universe or there. What would you guys consider evidence for a creator? Something like, would it be like seeing a creation or something? Something created like out of nothing or something.
Seeing something created out of nothing, like in a verifiable context, would certainly help to at least demonstrate that such a thing is done. I mean, I guess there's like virtual particles, and I'm not really up on all of what's available for evidence on those, whether they've been demonstrated to what degree. But yeah, there are these things called virtual particles, which are a model that pops in and out of existence. I don't know how valid or invalid it is. But that's a fantastic question, because the idea of would you accept a God, what would it take for you to believe in God, it ultimately depends on how they're defining the God. So yeah, I need to know what it is the claim is before I can say what it would take to demonstrate that claim. And I might not even be able to define what would demonstrate the claim. I've been handed really incoherent definitions of God before, where if someone asked me, what would it take for you to believe in this? I'm like, I don't know, because I don't even know what that is. I mean, you just defined it, but I have no clue what you're talking about. So it really depends on the claim.
All right, well, I think that a lot of people try to put the label of God on like some sort of like natural force or something like that.
I've seen
naturally
that.
occurring.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, the idea that God is nature.
I've had people tell me God is energy. Pantheists
love.
say that God is the universe. Yeah, God is love. Ultimately, though, when you start looking at what energy is, and you say, okay, is this what you're asserting your God is? You're going to get back no. So they'll define it and say it's, my God is energy, and then you say, okay, well, this is what energy is. Is this what you're saying your God is? And they respond and say no. So I'm back to square one, where I don't know what their God is. They're calling it energy, but when I tell them this is what I understand energy to be, and they're saying that's not what my God is. So then I'm back to...
It's a different God. No.
It's a different energy.
See, there's baggage in the word. It drives me crazy. It's one of the reasons why I hate the word spiritual and spirituality, because they're completely freaking useless labels. But the label that God that gets bandied about, people are like, oh, no, God is nature, God is love, God is energy, or God is all of us, or some consciousness. Yet, no. The word carries some baggage with it because of its historical use. It would be wrong for me to say, this coffee cup is God. It doesn't have any of the identifiable characteristics of any of the classical definitions of God where we get the baggage from. And the biggest one is, this exists. I mean, there's one big difference for you right there. But it's dishonest, disingenuous of people to try to argue God as something else. Hey, if God is energy and that's all, just use the word energy.
Okay.
You don't get to add the word God and then ignore the baggage when it's convenient, and yet use the baggage when it's convenient. Oh, God's energy, but he really, really needs $20. Why? It's unfair. It's not an intellectual argument. It is an attempt to sound accommodating. It is an attempt to sound sophisticated. It is an attempt to sound open-minded, and it is none of the above. It is childish and nonsensical.
I pretty much agree with that, but I don't want to completely sound like I'm 100% agreeing with you guys. It's the fact that I'm just gonna kind of go along with your general thoughts. I want to present other ideas that conflict, so we can either argue about something like that, so we can learn more or something like that. So the thing that I was mostly thinking about is to demonstrate, I guess, creation or something like that. I would consider, if I saw something coming from nothing, evidence of creation. I wouldn't say that's 100%. Maybe there's some other force behind it or something, but I would say that's pretty strong evidence.
Let me just say that right now there is a model called a virtual particle that is, like I say, I don't know how demonstrated it is, but there seems to be some indicator that there are things that pop into manifestation that is measurable and then disappear and then pop in again. So you might want to look that up, because my question would be, what if you had a particle that could wave in and out of measurable manifestation? That to you would be demonstration of creation?
I've seen
I would
something.
say no, that because it's sort of. I really don't know how to express my ideas about it. You know, I can't really find the right words. I wish I could, I guess, articulate myself better. But
I think one of the things we have to be careful about is, yeah, what you mean by something from nothing, sure, that'd be evidence. The question is, how do you test and identify that? Because I've seen something apparently come from nothing. I've been to tons of magic shows where that happens. The thing is, you need to devise some sort of testable conditions by which to demonstrate that, yes, in fact, there's nothing, and something has come from this nothing. And then once that's done, the only thing you know is that it is possible for something to come from nothing. In order to claim that you've identified the cause of this, you need additional evidence. It's much the same way we get tons of questions about claims of prophecy. And while they are ridiculous to the point that it's not even worth going into now, if somebody makes a prediction and it comes true, I don't care what it is, calling a coin toss, that tells you nothing other than they made a claim and it came to pass. You don't know how they made that claim. Did they know that the coin was going to come up heads, tails, heads because they got lucky? Because aliens were communicating with them? Because some god told them? Because they were manipulating the coin with their mind? You have no way of knowing from the thing itself what the cause is. You have to actually demonstrate the causal chain, not assume it. And there may be a way. I can't think of any way right now that a mere experiment about something from nothing, even if it could happen, would give you any evidence that would confirm the idea of a creator type being.
I think that I don't have that much to say else about that. I mean, you kind of cornered it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I stomped all over it, but I was hoping that it would at least address, what you were thinking about, and if so, then I'm fine. That's fair. So.
Well, the thing that I sort of wanted to address was like, I was gonna sort of say that since the Big Bang theory, so something came from nothing, potentially
That's not what it says.
That's not the theory.
Oh, okay. I guess I need to look some more stuff up about that.
If you email the list, I'll send you some links.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth doing, and it's common misconception. This is, people, in much the same way that I probably just said 20 things wrong when talking about quantum mechanics, although I'd hope that somebody would have slapped me before I got to 20. It's an area that I don't know enough about. And by and large, most people don't have, and I'm included, I don't have any kind of great understanding about Big Bang cosmology I'm not an astrophysicist or anything. But I have done, evidently, a little more studying than the average theist, the average creationist, I'll say, because they constantly come with the exact same claims that
Right.
simply aren't true.
Right.
And they're easily resolved by going and picking up a few books, a few articles by real scientists. And some are better than others at explaining things in terms that any of us could grasp. So, and Tracie has links that would work good for that.
Actually, the main reason I was calling wasn't necessarily about the Big Bang or necessarily that there's a creator. I mostly just wanted to ask you guys, what your thoughts were on miracles, because I've heard about them and I've seen people. One of my friends who was atheist, he went to some church thing, and they were praying about this lady who was in a wheelchair, and apparently she'd been in a wheelchair for years and years and years, and they prayed for her, and she actually ended up standing up in the wheelchair and walking around for the first time in years, when they were in the church service.
I'll let Tracie address this, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the line because you've asked several questions. There's a bunch of people waiting. I'm going to let Tracie address this, but let me ask you one question. Do you think the story's true?
I don't think my friend would have any reason to lie about it.
That's not what I asked.
Okay. Yes, I do think that it happened.
Okay. You want to take this?
I mean, it's an anecdote. I don't know what else to say about it. It's a claim, and I don't know anything about the woman. I don't know anything about the situation. I don't know why she was in that wheelchair. I don't know how long after this healing ceremony she was able to walk around. I don't know if she was able to hobble, before. I mean, being in a wheelchair doesn't mean you cannot walk. Some people in wheelchairs cannot walk. Some people in wheelchairs have difficulty walking, and I have yet to see any verified divine healing. I don't know what else to say to it.
Yeah, my big problem here is that, and this isn't, I'm not attacking you, Chris, I'm trying to explain this. Your first response when I asked you if you believed it was that your friend didn't have any reason to lie. Now, what that tells me is that the best reason you can think of for believing this is that it came from someone who doesn't have a reason to lie to you. That's not good enough. That's not remotely good enough. There are plenty of people who have no reason to lie, who relay stories that aren't true. That they may believe, or that they may be even doubtful of, but have heard second and third hands. And my response is, where is the scientific confirmation of these miracles? There isn't any.
Well, it's just like the question of, there's a lot of people that claim they've been abducted by aliens.
Right.
And they have no reason to lie. I mean, they're not like all getting rich or something. In fact, a lot of them are being ostracized as lunatics. And yet they're insisting they've been abducted and, probed by aliens. What is their motive?
If your primary criteria for believing something that you can't verify yourself is to determine whether or not the person who told you had a reason to lie, think about all the things that you would be forced to believe. Whatever religion you may happen to adhere to, wouldn't you also have to believe all of the other ones? Because there are sincere believers in every religion who have no reason to lie, who will tell you their miracle stories and their religious beliefs. Wouldn't you be forced by those criteria to accept all of them? And how could you possibly do that? You need better criteria in order to say that something is believable. And the more extraordinary the claim is, the better the evidence needs to be. We don't just say, well, I know it's an extraordinary claim and I really wish I had good evidence, but my mom told me and she wouldn't lie to me.
Or even I saw it myself.
Yeah. Plenty of times I've seen it myself.
We had the ghost story episode,
Yeah.
where we had somebody write in and say they'd seen a ghost.
Chris, I appreciate the call. We're running out of time. I got to get some other callers on there. You're welcome to call back. Next week I won't be here, but Russell will, and I'm sure he'd like to talk to you too. If you get more questions or anything else. As a reminder, anybody who doesn't get through on the telephone today or doesn't want to can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. And since I haven't mentioned it since we started the show, we're on the air for another 10 minutes, sorry. And after the show's over, we get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person's welcome to come down and join us. You can meet the folks in the studio audience, as well as the people responsible for the show. We've got Julie in California.
Hi.
Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
Good.
Pretty good.
First of all, I feel the need to comment on your previous conversations. As a PhD chemist, space scientist, God's particle is way blown out of proportion. All it is a particle called boson that supposedly gives other elements mass, and that's it. It's no proof that God exists, and
Oh, so I was right.
yeah.
Oh, okay. You're fine. Keep going.
Um,
I thought you were calling to correct me.
no. Also about the whole Big Bang Theory, it definitely is not something out of nothing. I mean, you can have proof of how mass and energy intertwine by looking at our sun. That's the driving force of our sun. Mass is converted into energy, and therefore, if you use common sense, you can see how energy can be turned into mass. But that's neither here nor there. I just felt
Or
the
if you
need to-
eat a donut, you can see
That's
how
right.
energy can turn into mass.
Exactly.
I like to keep it, Homer Simpson level when I'm dealing with my science.
Well, yeah. But one of the reasons why I was calling, I grew up in the Bible Belt, and while I had great parents who were not overly religious or did not, bring, I hate to say it, but kind of brainwash into religion, I did grow up in a religious area where the churches basically ruled the area. If the churches did not want something in the area, they ran it out. And I am forced to deal with a lot of these people when I go home. And it's very hard for me as someone who doesn't believe in religion, who doesn't believe in God. And how do you deal with these people who are so, for lack of a better term, brainwashed that, I mean, they can become quite hostile. And how do you deal with people like that?
Your turn.
I haven't had a lot of family issues.
Really?
Yeah, you've had more of the family fun.
Boy, I wish Beth was here. Sweetie, call in when the line's open. Maybe you can address Julie's comment. My experience has been a bit different. It hasn't been as bad as others. Clearly, I had family members who were disappointed, and there was this incredibly long period of adjustment where there was quite a bit of preaching and wailing and gnashing of teeth going on. I also live quite a distance from them, so only being able to see them perhaps once a year for a short time, we'd all much rather have fun and enjoy our time together than get into arguments and discussions. What I did to kind of quell this, and this won't work for everybody, but my family are among those who believe that there is a God who loves me and wants me to know that he exists, and they also believe that God answers prayer. And so I simply said, you should pray that God would reveal himself to me, because none of your arguments and preaching are going to have any effect. It is evidence. If your God exists, clearly he can demonstrate himself to me in a sufficient manner. You believe that he can and that he wants to, and yet he has not. So why aren't you adhering to God's plan? Because clearly if he wanted to, he'd have done it already. And instead, why don't you pray that God would reveal himself to me? And that is the tact they took, because they're ill-equipped to have the sort of apologetics arguments and philosophical discussions, and they've flatly admitted on this subject, they're closed-minded. God exists. He's the author of the Bible, the creator of the world. He's the one that loves them, etc. He exists real. No amount of argument, evidence, discussion, whatever will ever change their mind. And my response is, if that's the case, then I have no interest in discussing this, because I don't want to argue with people who are closed-minded, who aren't concerned at all with evidence. So why don't we set all this aside? You keep on praying till the day you die, and when we're together, why don't we just enjoy each other's company and have fun and have a good meal and go out in the yard, throw the ball around, do stuff like that. The way I portrayed that story, I just realized, kind of makes me look as like the mediator who settled everything. That's not the case. The idea for them to pray rather than preach was mine, but the adjustment to a new sense of normality was all of us, and it works. I love my parents. They love me. We get along. I didn't get to go up for Christmas. I really miss them. We don't fight and argue, but that's not the case in every family. I have close friends who are going through much more difficult times.
In fact, she might call in next week and ask the same question.
Yeah, you might think about that.
Okay.
Calling in next week, but there's no easy answer, and every family's different.
Well, my parents were always very open about that kind of thing. They just felt that that in the area that we were in, that we should be exposed to that. But I never was worried about my parents thinking a certain way about me. But sister, brother-in-law, friends, they're all pretty shocked. And I like I said, I was religious when I was younger, but as I got older and more educated and really started questioning things and really delving into what or why or any of that, that's when my ideas changed. And I don't think that they're quite comfortable with that.
Yeah, and they probably won't be, and you have to acknowledge that you're the one who changed, and that if that ends up costing you friends or family, that's just the price of it, and that part is on their head. Yes, you changed, but if they were truly friends and family who were loving and accepting of you as you were, irrespective of your beliefs, then you could maintain those relationships. And where those relationships are strained, yes, you were the impetus for the change, but the response that they have to you, that is their responsibility. It is probably, where it is exceptionally negative, it is probably a direct result of the strong religious indoctrination. The type of religious belief that says anybody that's significantly different from me is scary and evil.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we were taught that other religions were cults and all that.
They are.
Really scary.
And so was yours.
Yeah. We're all somebody's cult.
Yeah. Well,
That's true. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Great.
for
Thanks a lot.
calling.
We have, I kid you not, like 20 seconds. Drew? Drew, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I don't
guys
have
doing?
time for you to relay your story. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Especially since you were on topic.
Yeah, you were like the only one on topic, and we have completely run out of time. So I apologize, but if you want to call back in next week, that'd be great.
Or email the list.
Or email tv@atheist-community.org if you didn't get through today or you weren't able to. There's all the people who make the show happen. There's the email address. We'll be at Threadgills shortly, 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome. Don't forget about the lectures. There's the information about the graphics. And Brian Steeksma, for all those who keep asking, there's his name and the song and his MySpace page. We'll see you next week. Russell and I'm not sure who's here. Maybe Jeff? Not positive. Take care.